So I thought, oh, this would be awesome. This would be a perfect birthday gift to my husband, to show that we are pregnant, that we got this ultrasound that shows the baby. Anyway, back to what I was saying prior to that, because I went off on a tangent there. But I ended up having my phone interview, and then we set up my first appointment for March 14th. So March 14th is actually my husband's, or my fiance at the time, husband now, birthday. So I thought, oh, this would be awesome. This would be a perfect birthday gift to my husband, to show that we are pregnant, that we got this ultrasound that shows the baby, and everything can be wonderful, right? So unfortunately, it didn't go that route. When we got to the appointment, I was so nervous. I was bloated as all get out. Like, it had even started way beforehand, before I even got to like 6 weeks. Again, like on paper, I should have been 9 weeks. Okay, so I should have been 9 weeks. I'm looking at my calendar just to let you guys know. I should have been 9 weeks at that time of when I had that appointment, and so I couldn't button up my pants. I just zipped it up and just called it a day. Had a long shirt on so nobody can tell that I did not have my pants zipped. And I was just feeling uncomfortable, like not so much because something was wrong, but just because, I couldn't really fit my clothes. Like at this point, things wasn't fitting right. My boobs was hurt, like extremely sore. I still had the ongoing nausea. My husband has now slowly stopped throwing up, but it was still throwing up occasionally. And he still had the migraines and things like that, regarding, the pregnancy symptoms for your significant others. When we got to the appointment, I had to do a blood work again that morning prior to going to the appointment. So I did that. The levels again had increased. They was doubling, and I can't remember what it was at this point, but they was pretty high. And so when we got in the room and the doctor came in and did the ultrasound, she wasn't necessarily happy with what she had seen and what was going on. And now at this point, we saw, at the 7th week, we only saw the gestational sac. Now at this appointment, we could see the fetal pole, and that was it. So what she had me do was, get dressed again, but this time, this was both with the transvaginal one as well, or ultrasound, as well as the abdominal ultrasound. So she wasn't happy with what she was seeing on the screen. She wasn't really saying much of anything, but again, in my head, I was telling her I'm not 9 weeks. I know when I think I ovulated, and based on my ovulation, I was 5 weeks, based on where I thought I was. And so she said, okay, whatever, basically I didn't feel like she was really listening to me. But what she ended up doing was having me go down to another department that is escaping my mind at this moment. But she wanted me to go to them to get a more in-depth ultrasound. Because apparently their ultrasounds I put on the screens because I cannot remember the name of the department. Radiologist. Sorry. So she had me go down to the radiologist department, because their ultrasounds is more powerful than what you would have in a regular OB office. So she had me go there, and that's where they saw a lot more of what was going on than what she can actually see. This appointment was on the same day, literally maybe an hour and a half after my previous appointment with my OB. And so during that appointment, they saw the fetal pole, they saw the gestational sac, they saw what looked like a heartbeat, but no, like a heart, but no actual heartbeat. I would insert a picture of what they did give us, so that you can see, what it looked like or anything like that. But basically, at that appointment, we found out that our baby that we was hoping to be able to see doing well, moving around with an active heart, being active in a heartbeat and everything like that, end up it basically stopped developing at 5 or 6 weeks. And it was hard, to hear those words like, oh, we don't see a heartbeat. It was already hard enough knowing that they were thinking I was farther along and should have been farther along on the screen and on paper than what I really was. And so we end up leaving that appointment with the radiologist and just going back home. I cried a little bit, and I think we got something to eat, I think. So we end up eating and going to sleep, and just cried some more. And it was like, I told my husband I was sorry for ruining his birthday, because we, like I said, we had so much hope that everything was gonna pan out, and we would be able to see our baby, but instead we got bad news. And so I believe I had an appointment that Monday or Tuesday, so we both end up taking off work and going to the appointment to see my OB. She went over the ultrasound again, and had went over my blood work at that time. At that time it actually plateaued, and so she confirmed that at that point I was gonna most likely end up miscarrying. She didn't explain to me like what happened or the process or anything like that, but she wanted me to come back that Friday, I believe, so a week later after my initial appointment. And that's when she confirmed that I was actually miscarrying, and that she basically gave me my options that was available, whether by ending the pregnancy by medication, so it would jumpstart the miscarrying process, or I can just wait until I miscarry naturally on my own, or just go in for a DNC. I couldn't decide what I wanted to do, so I just basically was like, told her I didn't know what I wanted to do, because I had just wrapped my head around being pregnant, and now you telling me that my baby stopped growing, and this is what my options are to pretty much terminate the pregnancy. So what we had decided on was that I was gonna come back that Monday, and let her know what my decision was, whether or not we were just gonna go ahead and just do it naturally. She did suggest to do the medication, and so I think it was like 2 pills that I would take to jumpstart the miscarriage process, and then I would go home. Like, I would get it from her, then I would go back home and wait for the miscarriage to start happening once I took the pills. Or I don't know if it was vaginally or if it was mouth. I can't remember. But she suggested that would have been her method of doing it. And I was like, I don't care, like, whatever. So I left that appointment. We went home. We just cried. I cried. We just basically just stayed that night, that whole day in bed, and I just cried, So that Friday, I just had mild cramping. I didn't really have any symptoms anymore at this point, just the mild cramping. I didn't really have any bleeding yet. The bleeding didn't start until after my husband went to work, or my fiance at the time went to work. And it was just like here and there spotting type things, only mainly when I wiped. But the bleeding still hasn't really kicked in. So I was like, I didn't really know what was going on. I just knew that I was supposed to be miscarrying. And so I just kind of stuck it up. I just stayed home, stayed in bed, watched Netflix, just tried to ease my mind and just relax. Because in a sense, I was still hoping that everything she was telling me was a lie, that everything was going to work out okay, that, you know, because my levels had now increased again, and I didn't understand why that even happened. If I was supposed to miscarry, why is my levels increasing again? Like, what do you mean? Like, this is weird. So I was like, okay, well, maybe the baby's developing better, like more or whatever. Like, I'm like, yes, I'm still not have mal cramping, but I'm like, that I already had cramping when this whole process started. Like, that was one of the other symptoms that I did forget to mention, that I did experience cramping, little very very mild cramping, and I always felt like my period was gonna start, but nothing happened. And so I would, like, when I was at work, I would run to the bathroom, like, ooh, I would tell my friend, my real close friend at work, like, ooh, I think I'm starting now. Like, I gotta go run to the bathroom. I'll be right back. So I run to the bathroom. There's still nothing. Like, so I'm looking like, why am I feeling like I'm gonna start my period and nothing's happening? Like, so I was, you know, that was one of the symptoms that I was experiencing at the beginning of my pregnancy. But basically, you know, I had my blood work that Friday morning. It increased, and I still had the cramping. It wasn't horrible, but it wasn't comfortable, but it wasn't like, it was kind of like, it was very very mild. It didn't feel like period cramps, but it just was like cramping. So I'm like, I'm texting my husband, let him know like I'm okay, but I'm, you know, getting cramping. I don't know what's gonna happen. And so I'm like, I'm just laying in bed, just kind of waiting it out, seeing what's gonna happen. So I'm like, as the day went on, the cramping got a little bit more intense, but still nothing was going on until finally I just started spotting a little bit later on that night. So he asked me if I wanted to come home. I'm like, no, I'm okay. Like, the cramping is, you know, intensifying, but I'm only bleeding a little bit. Like, I don't think anything's gonna happen. Like, you know. So he ended up working overtime that night. So I'm like still home by myself, and it's getting, the bleeding has now picked up. It's about 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning now. So the bleeding picked up. The cramping still was horrible, and it pretty much stayed like that all throughout Saturday until that Sunday morning, where it completely intensified, as far as the cramping, and the bleeding picked up even more so, to the point that the cramping had gotten so bad to the point that I was literally having contractions at this point, and it was pretty much coming back to back to back to back. So I literally had maybe like a few 10 seconds in between each contraction or cramping, to the point that my fiance had now called our emergency nurse line, to see whether or not there was something he can do, like to see what we should do, because we didn't get any instructions from my OB to let us know like what to expect, what to do, or anything like that. So at this point, I'm now getting extremely nauseous. I'm telling him in the background, like, I feel like I'm gonna throw up. I feel like I'm like repeating this over and over and over again, and he's like talking to the nurse, and she's hearing me in the background, and she can hear that I'm literally in labor at this point, and you know, the labor or the contractions are coming back to back to back to back. and I'm in the background saying I'm gonna throw up. So she was like, she basically got first, before that even started, it was, 'cause at that point it was like when he first called, it was about every minute to every 10 seconds. So it wasn't constant, but as he kept talking to her, it started getting constant. So originally she was like, oh, well, just try to relax, see if we can wait it out until the morning time, because, you know, at this time, everything is closed. The only thing that's open is the emergency room. So she was like, see if you can wait it out. If you can't, then go to the emergency room. So, you know, they still talking. There's been probably about 25 minutes now with them talking on the phone. And now I'm constantly saying, oh my God, like, when will it stop? Like, it's just kept going and going and going. And you can hear me sobbing in the background, saying I'm gonna throw up. Just been extremely, just me being miserable. Like, she could hear it in my voice and everything. So she was like, I suggest you guys just go to the emergency room. There's no point of, you know, waiting any longer, because she's in pain. Like, she can't take it anymore. So we went to the emergency room. By this time I can walk just a little bit. I couldn't really stand up. I was like bending over, and I could walk just a little bit, like, but I was walking very, very slowly. Like, I couldn't really, it was hard for me to even move. And then any movement that I made, it just made it worse. And so by the time we got to the hospital, which we live about 5 minutes, 10 minutes away at the most, 8 minutes, once we got to the hospital, I couldn't even walk anymore. Like, I couldn't even hold myself up. My husband was like literally carrying me, trying to, you know, assist me while I tried to walk, and I was like literally about to fall on the floor. Like, I couldn't do it. Like, I was exhausted. I was just extremely just miserable at this point. And then the nauseousness just kept going. The contractions just kept going. And so he ended up leaving me, or no, the nurses saw us coming up, and they saw that he, you know, basically he was trying to carry me into the emergency room, and they basically brought out a wheelchair. They were like, hey, you guys need a wheelchair? So they brought me a wheelchair, wheelchair me into the building, and you know, checked me in and everything. We ended up doing an ultrasound, both vaginal and abdominal. I told them what was going on, what my doctor said, and I'm like, I guess I'm miscarrying now. I don't know. Like, they confirmed that I did. Basically, at this point, there is nothing to be seen on the screen. Basically, there was no sign of a pregnancy at all at this point. Everything had already passed. And so they just gave me some pain medicine through my IV, hooked me up to IV, and just tried to pretty much soothe me as much as they could. As we was actually getting checked in, I actually ended up throwing up. I threw up on the gentleman who was, you know, taking my vitals and all of that. And I apologized to him over and over again. Like, even after we left, I apologized. Still was apologizing to the gentleman. Like, I felt so embarrassed. I threw up all over him, all over myself. It was just a mess. Like, but, you know, I'm sure that wasn't anything that he wasn't really used to seeing, but I told him, I'm like, hey, I think I'm gonna throw up. Like, I think I'm gonna throw up. Like, for real this time, I think I'm gonna throw up. And by the time he grabbed it back, I was already, it was everywhere. And so, you know, he cleaned that up. I cleaned up myself as much as I could. But at that point, I didn't care anymore. Like, I didn't care if it was all over my shirt, down my bra. Like, you know, I was like, I'm in pain. Just relieve me of this pain is what I was thinking about the most. So after a couple hours, they finally released us. We went and got something to eat, and pretty much came back home and stayed in bed, cried some more, and, you know, just tried to console each other from what we thought was going to be in America, like the best thing that had happened to us, our first child, that ended up not happening. So, you know, within the next couple of days, I went through the whole why this had to happen, like why me. So I blamed myself, of course, because, like I said, I didn't know I was pregnant. So I was still taking medications that I probably should not have been taking. I was still drinking here and there during the whole, you know, time, just because I didn't know I was pregnant. And even with the little bit that I could drink, like, it had gotten to the point where I couldn't even drink anything. Like, I could take a sip and be knocked out. So, like, I was already, you know, very, very fatigued. So any sip that I would make or drink or have rather, I never completed. Like, so I can maybe pour a glass of wine, which at the time I was drinking Stella Rose, which doesn't have that much alcohol in it. But even that, I could only take like 2 sips and I'll be out. Like, you can't, I physically could not take a sip. Like, you know what I mean? So it wasn't necessarily making me sick, but it wasn't doing anything for me. Like, I didn't, that taste of the alcohol just turned me off. Like, I didn't want it. Like, I could take a sip and just be like, okay, I'm done. Like, you can have it. So I wasn't like drinking excessively or anything like that, but, you know, I blamed myself for everything for doing the things that I was doing, even though I didn't know I was pregnant. I felt like I probably should have known, like, you know, I should have known what was going on with myself, with my inside of me and my body and everything like that. So yeah, that was what happened, the process that happened with my first pregnancy. So we decided once, you know, we lost that pregnancy that we was gonna go ahead and continue on planning our wedding